Welcome back to History Before Sleep, where the past quietly whispers you to rest. Tonight we drift through the sands of time to uncover the forgotten civilizations that once thrived and then vanished without a trace. From jungle-covered temples to lost cities swallowed by the sea, their stories are faint echoes waiting to be heard once more. If you enjoy relaxing historical journeys like this, consider subscribing. It helps more than you know. And before you get too cozy, tell us in the comments, where in the world are you listening from? And what time is it right now, where you are? Now close your eyes if you like, and let's begin the slow descent into history's forgotten chapters. Let's step into our first forgotten world, moving slowly and calmly, as night falls on the Indus Valley civilization. Indus Valley civilization, soft water flowing, under a pale moon on the dry plains of the Indus River Valley, lie the crumbling outlines of ancient cities. Once, many thousands of years ago, this land was home to a great and thriving civilization. The Indus Valley civilization, also known as the Harappan civilization, flourished from around 3300 BC to 1300 BC in what is now Pakistan and northwest India. In its time, it was one of the largest civilizations in the world, spanning an area about the size of Western Europe. By day you might have seen busy streets and orderly brick houses. By night, perhaps the warm glow of oil lamps in windows, and the sound of distant voices. Now, all that remains is quiet starlight, over mounds of earth that hide the remnants of those once bustling cities. Let's walk slowly through one of these ancient sites, the city of Mohenjo-Daro. The air is still and warm. Imagine the layout of the city around you. The streets are laid out in a precise grid pattern, intersecting at right angles. Even in ruin, the plan of the city is clear and organized. Beneath your feet, the ground is baked clay brick. These bricks were all made to a standard size long ago, a testament to how carefully planned everything was. You pass by the lower walls of what were houses and workshops. Each one had access to a remarkable plumbing and drainage system for its time. Listen closely, and you might almost hear the faint trickle of water. The Indus people built covered drains along the streets, and many homes had their own bath areas or toilets connected to these drains. It's astonishing to think that over 4,000 years ago, this city had amenities that would not become common again for millennia. The night breeze carries the faint scent of dust and dried riverbed. It whispers through what used to be the Great Bath, a large public bathing pool made of brick, sunken into the ground, and once lined with smooth bitumen to hold water. The bath is empty now, of course, its edges cracked, but if you close your eyes, you can imagine the cool water rippling under torchlight, as people gathered for ritual cleansings, or simply to socialize at day's end. The Indus Valley people were sophisticated urban dwellers. They grew crops of wheat, barley, peas and cotton in the surrounding fields. Indeed, they were the first in the world to weave cotton cloth, dressing in comfortable textiles when most humans still wore animal skins or crude fabrics. They kept cattle, water buffalo, and even elephants as domestic animals. In the quiet night, maybe you envision a distant cattle lowing, or the rustle of an elephant moving near the dark outlines of palm trees by the river. There is a remarkable peace here. Archaeologists have found no evidence of armies or warfare in these cities. No swords or shields, no destroyed fortresses. It seems the Harappans lived in relative harmony, trading and farming without the constant specter of war that haunted so many later civilizations. The city had no grand royal palace that we can identify, no ostentatious tombs of kings. It's possible they were governed by elected councils or gentle rulers, or perhaps by merchants and priests. As you wander these ruins, you get a sense of a society focused on order and practical comfort, rather than conquest. Houses were of equal sizes in many neighborhoods, suggesting there were no extreme social classes, no sprawling mansions next to hovels, but a steady equality in life. Imagine families retiring to their homes at night, perhaps gazing at the same stars above that we see now, secure in their well-planned city. One of the enduring mysteries of the Indus civilization is their undeciphered script. In the soft light of the moon, picture a trader long ago pressing a carved seal into wet clay to mark his goods. The seal leaves an imprint of a short sequence of symbols, maybe a unicorn figure, or a bull and a row of strange pictographs. Over 4,000 such inscriptions have been found on seals and tablets, but they are all very short, just a few characters, and no one today can read them. The language of the Indus people remains unknown, locked behind those tiny symbols. Without being able to read their words, we rely on archaeology to tell their story. This unknown language adds to the hush of the place, voices we will never hear directly, words lost to time, leaving us only silent ruins. Eventually, around 1900 BC, something changed. You feel a hint of it in the air, a dryness, a stillness to the once mighty Indus River. Climate change quietly altered the landscape. The monsoon rains grew weaker. The river that fed these cities may have shifted its course or dwindled. Year by year the crops would have yielded less. Wells might have begun to dry up. Perhaps the people noticed the summers growing hotter and the winters longer. In the distance we might imagine families deciding to move eastward, toward greener lands. Unlike a sudden calamity, the Indus civilization's decline seems to have been a slow, gradual ebbing. By around 1700 BC, most of the great cities, including Mohenjo-Daro and Harappa, were abandoned. There was no grand destruction, no enemy razing the city in a single day. Instead, the people simply left, over a span of years or decades, like a slow exhale of a breath. Stand for a moment in the center of what was once a busy marketplace. The stalls are gone. The goods, grain, cotton, pottery, beads, long since scattered or buried. Perhaps you hear echoes of those market days, the chatter of voices bargaining gently, the laughter of children playing by a well, the calls of merchants with carts of fish or spices. Then the echoes fade. By night, when the last families departed, these streets would have fallen into a profound silence. The wind and dust became the new citizens of Mohenjo-Daro. Over the next centuries, sand blew in and covered the lower walls. The river changed course, no longer flooding the streets in the annual cycle that once renewed the soil. The civilization did not vanish all at once. Many people likely moved to smaller villages, adapting to new ways of life. Elements of their culture lived on in the traditions of later peoples, but the grand cities themselves lay forgotten, sleeping beneath mounds of earth, completely lost to human memory, until their ruins were rediscovered in the 1920s by archaeologists. Now the Indus Valley lies in darkness and quiet, but it is a peaceful quiet. Take a slow breath, appreciating the calm of this place. After all those ages, the mystery of the Harappans' disappearance doesn't need an answer tonight. It's enough to know that everything has its time. Their time passed, and eventually new civilizations rose elsewhere. The bricks under your feet have kept their patient vigil for over 3,000 years. They don't mind if we leave them now to their rest. With gentle steps we will depart the Indus city and move on. As you inhale, imagine drawing in the wisdom of this ancient gentle culture. As you exhale, breathe out any remaining tension. We now drift westward, across lands and seas, to another island civilization that flourished and faded long ago. The mysterious Minoans of Crete. The Minoan civilization, soft ocean waves. Picture the Mediterranean Sea on a warm night, waves lapping quietly against a sandy shore. Inland rises the silhouette of a grand palace, with many columns, its outline illuminated by flickering torchlight under the stars. We have arrived in Crete, an island in the far southern waters of Greece, around 1500 BC. This is the world of the Minoan civilization, often considered Europe's very first advanced civilization. The air carries the salty scent of the sea, mixed with the perfume of night-blooming flowers in the palace gardens. In the distance, you can hear a gentle breeze rustling through olive groves, and perhaps the tinkling of goat bells on the hills. The scene is calm and stable, as if nothing here could ever abruptly change. Yet the Minoan world would face a great upheaval, one that many believe led to its decline. The Minoans emerged around 3000 BC on Crete, and flourished for well over a millennium. They built palaces, not quite like fortresses or castles, but sprawling complex structures that served as centers of administration, worship, and trade. One such palace was at Knossos, where the legendary King Minos was said to have ruled. The very term Minoan comes from King Minos of myth, who according to Greek legends kept a minotaur, a creature half man half bull, in an elaborate labyrinth. Those are stories, of course. In reality, the Minoans were sophisticated, peaceful traders and artisans. We stroll through the palace courtyard. Under your feet are paving stones worn smooth by countless footsteps of Minoan citizens attending festivals long ago. The columns around you are painted in earthy red and black hues. Faded murals on the palace walls depict lively scenes, lithe figures in bright skirts or kilts, dancers and athletes, dolphins and lilies. The Minoans loved nature and vibrant color. Their art shows joyful scenes of flowers, dolphins and dancing, rather than scenes of war. Tonight the palace is empty and quiet. But let's imagine it at its peak. Gentle music from lyres and flutes might have echoed through these halls during ceremonies. The Minoans left behind no great army or arsenal. Like the Indus people, they seem to have emphasized trade and prosperity over military might. The soft steps of priestesses in flowing white gowns once crossed these stones, perhaps carrying offerings to their goddess. Minoan religion, as hinted by frescoes, centered on a mother goddess and sacred symbols like the bull and the double-headed axe. In the warm night air, you can almost hear distant laughter from a long-ago festival. The Minoans were known to perform astonishing acrobatic leaps over bulls as part of their rites, a form of ancient sport or ritual. Now, only the crickets in the grass break the silence. For centuries, the Minoans dominated maritime trade in this part of the world. Their ships sailed the Mediterranean, exchanging Cretan olive oil, wine and crafted goods for copper from Cyprus, or tin from distant lands. They were master craftsmen. Minoan pottery was finely made, and beautifully painted with spirals, flowers and sea creatures. In this meditative moment, imagine a potter at his wheel in a village outside the palace. Long ago, the rhythmic turning of the wheel, the clay taking shape under skilled hands, the quiet concentration as a new jug or bowl comes into being. Such domestic, peaceful scenes were the heartbeat of Minoan life. Yet, even the most serene of civilizations can face sudden catastrophe. Around 1600 BC, Crete and the surrounding region experienced one of the greatest natural disasters of antiquity, the massive eruption of the Thera volcano on the nearby island of Santorini. In your mind's eye, picture a distant flash on the northern horizon, a roar like the sky shattering. But we will keep it gentle in memory, watching from a safe distance. The eruption was cataclysmic, likely obliterating much of Santorini and sending towering tsunamis towards Crete. A fine rain of volcanic ash might have drifted down even here at Knossos, turning day into an eerie twilight. We can imagine the confusion and fear among the Minoans as the sea temporarily withdrew and then rushed back in great waves. Many coastal villages and ports would have been washed away. Crops across Crete could have been blanketed in ash, leading to failed harvests and famine. The starvation and economic turmoil that followed must have shaken this society deeply. Stand in the palace now, and notice how some of the walls have cracks, how parts of the upper stories are missing. Archaeologists indeed found evidence that around this time, many Minoan palaces were damaged or destroyed. But it appears the Minoans tried to rebuild and carry on. They were resilient. The civilization survived the immediate aftermath of the eruption. Life continued, though likely with hardship. However, a weakened Minoan society may have become vulnerable. Not long after, around 1450 BC, it seems new people arrived on Crete. The Mycenaeans from mainland Greece flov, minubi.blogspot.com. Perhaps they came as invaders taking advantage of a weakened state, or perhaps they were initially invited as merchants or mercenaries. Either way, over time, the Mycenaean Greeks took control of the island. The linear writing of the Minoans was replaced by Linear B, a script used for the Greek language. One by one, the distinctively Minoan aspects of culture began to fade or hybridize. The artwork began to reflect Mycenaean styles, and the administrative records which we can now read, since Linear B was deciphered, show Greek names and gods. The great Minoan palaces, except Knossos, were abandoned or repurposed. The Minoan civilization slowly dissolved, absorbed into what became classical Greek civilization. Now all around us are the ruins of Knossos under the moon. Vines creep up the once bright frescoed walls. A fallen pomegranate from an overgrown orchard splits quietly on the ground, its seeds drying in the night air. For centuries after the final decline around 1100 BC, the memory of the Minoans likely lived on only in fragmentary myths, passed down by the Greeks, tales of King Minos the Minotaur, the Labyrinth, and Atlantis. Some speculate the Atlantis legend might be a distant memory of the Theran eruption and the fall of this Bronze Age world. But the actual people, their names, their everyday lives were forgotten. The palaces were left to crumble. Eventually, even their location was lost until archaeologists uncovered them in the modern era. Take a moment to absorb the tranquility here. The tumult of the eruption and invasion are long past. What remains is a gentle night breeze carrying the scent of wild thyme across the hill where Knossos stands. The devastation, once so terrifying, has been soothed by time. Moss and flowers reclaim the carved stones. The Minoan civilization fell asleep, and now it dreams in the fragments and broken columns left behind. As you breathe softly, you may sense a faint pride lingering in these ruins, a pride in being the cradle of European civilization, even if only stones recall it. The Minoans did not disappear in a single instant. Their culture transformed and flowed onward. In a way, they quietly walked off the stage of history, leaving the set pieces behind for us to find. Let us gently depart Crete, now, sailing eastward on calm seas. The stars overhead guide us to another land, a dry land of cliffs and canyons. There, hidden in the rocks, an ancient people built their homes and then vanished. We arrive next in the desert southwest of North America, to visit the world of the ancestral Pueblones, often called the Anasazi, who also disappeared without a trace. The ancestral Pueblones, Anasazi, desert winds softly blowing. Feel the air turn dry and cool as we float above a moonlit desert mesa. It is the late 13th century AD in the region that we now call the Four Corners of the United States, where Utah, Colorado, Arizona, and New Mexico meet. Tucked into the sheer cliffs of a canyon are little stone dwellings, almost invisible until you notice the angular shadows. We are visiting the ancestral Pueblones, often referred to by the Navajo word Anasazi, meaning ancient ones. Here in places like Mesa Verde and Chaco Canyon, these people built entire towns into the sides of cliffs and in canyon bottoms. Tonight, these cliff dwellings are silent and abandoned, as they have been for over 700 years. But in your mind, you can picture them as they once were, warm fires glowing in hearths within sandstone walls, the scent of cornmeal and roasting squash in the air, voices echoing off the canyon walls as families settled in for the night. In the darkness, we carefully step onto a narrow ledge, leading to a cluster of structures known as Cliff Palace in Mesa Verde. Above us is a rock overhang, sheltering the village as it did centuries ago from rain and snow. The structures are of different shapes, some round towers, some rectangular rooms, all made of hand-shaped stones stacked with adobe mortar. The entryways are small and humble, suited for a people of smaller stature, and for keeping out the cold. As we peer gently into one dwelling, we see the soot of ancient fires still blackening the ceiling. The ancestral Puebloans were skilled masons and artisans. By touch you can feel petroglyphs carved into the rock face nearby, perhaps a spiral symbol, or a lizard shape, left by a careful hand. This was a thriving community around the year 1200. By day, children would have played on these ledges with watchful parents, ensuring they didn't go too near the edge. Women ground corn with stone manos and metates, the rhythmic crunch carrying through the crisp air. Men wove turkey feather blankets, or tended small terraced fields on the mesa top. The Puebloans grew maize, beans and squash, the three sisters of their agriculture, and supplemented with wild game and gathering. At night families likely huddled around fires, telling stories that had been passed down for generations. Stories that maybe still live on in the oral traditions of today's Hopi Zuni, or other Pueblo peoples, their descendants. Yet, something prompted these people to leave their beautiful cliff villages around AD 1300. We stand now in a place that was deliberately vacated. There is an eerie tidiness to it, as if the people meant to return but never did. Roof beams have long since rotted away, roofs caved in, but otherwise, it looks as if the inhabitants packed up their belongings and walked off. Why would they do that? The night wind whispers possible answers: drought, conflict, migration. Tree ring records show that a severe drought struck this region from around 1276 to 1299 AD, a period called the Great Drought. Year after year the rains failed, crops withered on the mesa tops, food became scarce. Perhaps initially the people tried to cope, building their homes higher in the cliffs, possibly for defensive advantage. As resources grew scarce, and tensions with neighboring groups rose. Indeed, we notice that some later cliff dwellings are built in nearly inaccessible spots, indicating fear or strife. It's as if the people were retreating into fortified refuges. This suggests there may have been conflict, maybe warfare, or raids occurring as everyone competed for the meager food and water remaining. One theory imagines that after struggling for some years, the ancestral Puebloans made a collective decision to migrate to better lands. On a calm morning sometime in the late 1200s, extended families might have gathered what they could carry: tools, sacred objects, seeds, infants, and climbed the worn paths up the cliffs for the last time. They left behind heavier furniture, some grinding stones, even pet parrots. Yes, they kept brilliantly colored macaws, traded from far to the south. These were offerings to the places they had inhabited, perhaps a way to respectfully close that chapter. We can almost see their departing footprints in the dust, if we strain our imagination. A line of people winding out of the canyon, carrying their lives on their backs, heading southeast toward the Rio Grande, or west toward Hopi mesas. They did not vanish into thin air. They moved and joined other communities, evolving into the Pueblo cultures, encountered by the Spanish centuries later. But to the canyons they left, they were gone without a trace of where they went. Now the cliff city is populated only by swallows and bats. The same wind that gently brushes your face also rustles the dried sagebrush below. The only reply to our questions about why they left. Some archaeologists think social turmoil, or even violence, occurred near the end. Evidence of burned structures, and hastily abandoned kiffers, subterranean ceremonial chambers, hint at conflict. There are even signs of resource stress, like malnutrition in the last years. So perhaps the society was fractured by hunger and fear, and ultimately the survivors chose to seek a new home elsewhere rather than endure more. Whatever the causes, by around 1300 AD, the Anasazi homeland was largely deserted. When later nomadic tribes like the Navajo came through, they found only the empty cliff houses and gave them the name Anasazi, the Ancient Ones, not knowing that these were the very ancestors of other pueblos to the south and west. Yet, standing here in the quiet ruins, we don't sense tragedy so much as solemn resolution. The moon casts the stone walls in silver relief, and it's surprisingly easy to imagine that the spirits of this place are at peace. The people did what they had to do to survive. Their cities became part of the earth again, slowly and gently. Take a slow breath and feel the stillness of this canyon, the endurance of the stones. The story of the ancestral Puebloans reminds us that sometimes even deeply rooted communities must move on, but they carry their traditions with them to new lands. The old home becomes a memory, a whispered legend. We carefully step away from the cliff palace, climbing back down the path. The desert night is vast above, sprinkled with stars. Our next destination lies far to the south and east, across jungles and mountains, to another people who built great things and then disappeared. We are traveling now to the dense rainforests of southern Mexico to meet the enigmatic Olmec civilization. The Olmec civilization jungle night sounds. Feel the air grow humid and warm as we find ourselves amid a lush tropical forest. The night is alive with the gentle trilling of insects and distant croaks of frogs, a soothing chorus under the canopy of ceiba and mahogany trees. We are in the lowlands of southern Mexico, near the Gulf Coast, and the time is around 800 BC. Scattered around a clearing are immense shapes looming in the moonlight, half hidden by vines. Stepping closer, you realize these are giant carved stone heads, some as tall as a person or higher. Their features are broad and strong, with distinct faces wearing calm, almost meditative expressions. These silent sentinels are the most famous relics of the Olmec civilization, an ancient culture often considered the mother civilization of Mesoamerica. The Olmecs flourished roughly from 1600 BC to about 400 BC in these tropical lowlands. They were among the first in this region to build cities and ceremonial centers. As we walk quietly under the dripping leaves, we come upon the remnants of one such center, perhaps La Venta, which was once an island in a swampy area. The terrain is soft underfoot, rich with centuries of leaf litter. Through breaks in the foliage, you catch sight of earthen mounds and platforms. The barely discernible outline of a pyramid, now just a gentle hill cloaked in greenery, stands against the starry sky. At its height, La Venta had a great pyramid that might have looked like a conical hill, and wide plazas where priests and rulers conducted rituals. Pause for a moment and imagine this site in an earlier era. Torches illuminate the plaza, smoke from incense, copal resin rises toward the stars, and an Olmec priest wearing a jaguar pelt mask gently chants to the deities of rain and fertility. The Olmecs revered the jaguar, and in their art, they often depicted beings that are part jaguar, part human, perhaps spirit transformers, or powerful rain spirits. You might recall the faint scent of copal smoke mixing with the rich smell of damp earth and flowers. It's a heady, calming scent that lingers even in memory. On the ground, there are half-buried pieces of polished jade and serpentine arranged in mosaics, offerings that the Olmecs carefully buried as part of their ceremonies. They had an advanced sense of art and made beautiful jade figurines and masks. Some of these offerings were purposefully interred and left when the city was abandoned, as if to bless the ground forever. We walk past one of the colossal heads, marveling at its existence. Each of these heads was carved from a single enormous boulder of basalt, dragged over many miles, possibly floated on rafts to the site. They likely represent Olmec rulers wearing helmet-like headdresses. By moonlight, their faces seem contemplative. One cannot help but feel the presence of the individuals they depict, as if they are watching over their lost civilization. The jungle has grown up around them, but they endure. Crickets chirp softly around the base of one, accentuating the deep quiet of this lost city, of this lost city, of this lost city, of this lost city. The Olmec civilization was among the first in the Americas to develop a complex culture. They built the earliest known pyramids in Mesoamerica. Engaged in long-distance trade, archaeologists have found Olmec-style artifacts far away, suggesting they exchanged goods and ideas with other contemporaries, and may have even devised early forms of writing and the Mesoamerican calendar. If you listen carefully, you might imagine the distant thump of a rubber ball. The Olmecs likely played the Mesoamerican ball game, the same game that later Maya and Aztecs played on stone courts. Indeed, the word Olmec means rubber people in the language of the Aztecs, referencing their region's latex-producing trees and the rubber balls made from them. So perhaps by night long ago, young Olmec athletes practiced in the plaza, the ball slamming against the stone markers with dull thuds, the sound echoing briefly before being swallowed by the night. Around 400 BC, however, the lights of La Venta and other Olmec centers went out. Something happened that caused the Olmec population to decline and their cities to be abandoned. The exact reasons remain a bit of a mystery. One clue lies in the earth. Evidence suggests significant environmental changes occurred. The rivers that the Olmecs depended on might have changed course or flooded catastrophically. Some researchers think that intense climate shifts or ecological exhaustion, perhaps from their farming methods, made the region less able to support large groups of people. Another theory points to tectonic activity. The Gulf Coast is not far from seismic zones, and an earthquake or subsidence could have altered the landscape, disrupting agriculture and forcing people to move. Additionally, signs of volcanic activity in the region during Olmec times have been found. A volcanic eruption might have covered fields in ash or frightened communities into relocation. As we stand among the ruins, imagine the last generations of Olmecs during the terminal formative period. The population was dwindling, perhaps fewer children's laughter was heard each year. Fields may have yielded less. One by one, families likely made the decision to leave these ceremonial centers. There may not have been any war or invasion. Indeed, archaeologists have not identified an external conquering force. It seems to have been a gradual depopulation. Between 400 and 350 BC, the eastern half of the Olmec heartland became almost empty of people, and it remained sparsely inhabited for a long time. We can envision an Olmec elder standing at the edge of the village as the last few young families pack up their belongings onto canoes or carry them on their backs, heading inland or downriver to find new homes. The elder looks at the emptying plaza, the silent stone heads, and then he too turns and leaves, following his people into the unknown. The rainforest's vines and trees slowly encroach, year by year, covering the plazas, pushing through the floors of houses, until only those massive carved stones and a few earth mounds hint that a city was ever here. But the Olmecs did not vanish entirely. They left a cultural legacy that influenced later civilizations like the Maya and Aztec. We feel that thread of continuity as a gentle reassurance in the air. The succeeding cultures carried forward elements of Olmec religion, art motifs, and possibly aspects of their social organization. In a sense, the Olmecs quietly handed the torch of civilization to the next runners and faded into the shadows. Cradled by the steamy night, and the sounds of the tropical forest, we step away from the Olmec heads. They gaze forward impassively, as they have for over 2 millennia. Their watch will continue long after we're gone. With a final glance at their patient faces, we prepare to journey to another part of the world, leaving the dense forests of the Americas, and crossing now to a different kind of jungle, an urban jungle of pyramids and palaces. We venture into central Mexico to visit the ancient city of Teotihuacan, which too was left eerily empty at its height. Teotihuacan night breeze over stone. We arrive on a broad, open avenue under a clear, dark sky. The air at this high altitude is cool, and there's a faint smell of dry grass and stone. Stretched out before us is the Grand Avenue of the Dead in Teotihuacan, one of the largest cities in the world during its prime, around 500 AD. Now, however, the city lies in shadowy silence. To our left, the hulking outline of the Pyramid of the Sun rises 20 stories high, a massive terraced pyramid now bathed in gentle starlight. To our right, further north, stands the Pyramid of the Moon, solemnly overlooking the avenue from the foot of a mountain. Smaller temple platforms and palace compounds line the avenue's sides. It's a truly monumental urban layout, yet no fires twinkle on the pyramids, no residents walk the streets. Teotihuacan mysteriously collapsed and was abandoned around 1400 years ago, and here we find ourselves amid its ghostly architectural grandeur. Walking slowly down the avenue, our footsteps make the slightest scuff on ancient paving stones. The city at its peak housed perhaps 125,000 to 200,000 people, a multicultural metropolis that drew in peoples from across Mesoamerica. Imagine it in those days, the avenue bustling with traders carrying textiles, cacao, obsidian blades. Teotihuacan was famed for its sharp obsidian tools. The smells of cooking maize tortillas and burning copal incense waft through the air. The sound of 1,000 conversations in the Teotihuacano language, the actual language is still unknown to us, blends into a constant hum. Perhaps distant music of drums and flutes is heard from a temple ceremony at the Temple of the Feathered Serpent Quetzalcoatl, near the Ciudadela complex behind us. But all of that lively energy is now a far-off echo. As we approach the Pyramid of the Moon at the north end of the avenue, the enormous open plaza before it lies empty. We stop and tilt our head up. The Pyramid of the Moon looms directly above, a silhouette against the stars. Normally, a city of this size would never be so quiet. Its emptiness almost feels intentional, as if a spell of sleep was cast over it. The Aztecs, who discovered Teotihuacan's ruins centuries later, circa 1400s AD, were awed by them, and thought giants or gods must have built the city. They named it Teotihuacan, meaning the place where the gods were created. In their time, even they had no records of the original inhabitants. Those people were long gone and forgotten. Why was such a magnificent city abandoned? The clues whisper to us as we stand in the plaza. Archaeologists found evidence that around 600 AD, something violent happened within the city. Many of the major structures along the Avenue of the Dead show signs of having been deliberately burned. Statues and religious icons were smashed or defaced. It appears there was an uprising or conflict within Teotihuacan. Perhaps the common people revolted against the elite rulers, or perhaps rival factions fought each other in a civil war. The flames devoured the temples and elite compounds. One can imagine the roar of fire and the crash of roofs, the cries in the night, as centuries of accumulated power unraveled in a short span of chaos. But let us keep these imaginings gentle. We see the glow of those fires only from far off in time, their heat long cooled on the cracked stones under our feet. Another possibility is that invaders from outside took advantage of a weakened Teotihuacan, maybe weakened by drought or internal strife, and sacked the city. However, notably, Teotihuacan lacks the heavy fortifications one might expect for a militaristic empire. It's as if the city's people felt secure for centuries and were caught by surprise, or the threat came from within. Whatever the exact cause, the great city collapsed into disorder. Over the next century or two, its population drastically declined. By around 750 AD, Teotihuacan was largely deserted. The remaining inhabitants, perhaps a few families or communities hanging on in the outskirts, eventually left to join other cultures or return to their ethnic homelands. The city's beating heart went silent. Now, as we listen, we hear only a faint breeze sweeping down the long avenue. It makes a low humming sound as it passes the temple stairways, almost like the city is exhaling after telling us its tale. Wild grasses grow between the stones. A lonely owl hoots from somewhere atop the Pyramid of the Sun, a guardian of the night. The emptiness here is not hostile, it's poignant and awe-inspiring. It's as if Teotihuacan itself chose to guard its secrets. The people left no written history that we can fully read. A few paintings and symbols, but no readable texts to narrate who they were. So the city itself, in its mute grandeur, is the storyteller. As you breathe in, take in the notion that even the mightiest cities can become as quiet as this. And breathing out, release any sense of urgency. Nothing in Teotihuacan urges us to solve its mystery tonight. It has waited over 1,000 years for answers, and it can wait longer. In the meantime, the ruins simply are, existing peacefully under the sky. We leave the city of the gods now, making our way slowly out. Perhaps you run your hand along one of the massive stone carvings of a feathered serpent head on the temple of Quetzalcoatl. Its features weathered but still discernible, feeling cool and solid. It's a final tactile goodbye to this place. From here, our journey takes us to a very different environment. The humid banks of a river in South Asia where another great civilization once thrived, or to the marshy delta of the Nile. But no, we've visited Indus already, and we skip Egypt, for Egypt did not disappear, it transformed. Instead, let us journey to a different continent now, to the far side of the world, the Pacific Ocean, where a small isolated civilization created wonders and then faced a dramatic decline. Close your eyes, and let the scent of salt water and the cry of distant seabirds enter your imagination. We are headed to Easter Island, home of the Rapa Nui culture. Easter Island, Rapa Nui, gentle ocean waves. Waves crash softly against a rocky shore, and a cool ocean breeze brushes your face. We find ourselves on a tiny speck of land in the vast Pacific Ocean. This is Easter Island, known to its native people as Rapa Nui. The time is around the 18th century, 1700s, but in truth, time feels blurred on this lonely island. The traditions here span many centuries before that. All around the coastal plains stand the iconic silhouettes of Moai, the great stone statues carved by the Rapa Nui people. In the dim light before moonrise, these statues appear as dark guardians, lined up on their stone platforms, gazing eternally inland. Once, not so long ago, this island supported a complex society that built these monuments. But when the outside world first arrived in 1722, they found a society in collapse, and to this day, the collapse of Rapa Nui's civilization stands as a haunting mystery of human ecology. Let's walk along the slope near Rano Rano Ko, the volcanic quarry, where most of the moai were carved. The ground is littered with tools left unused and partially finished statues that never made their journey to the Ahu platforms. You can feel the uneven earth. It's actually the partly buried bodies of moai, only their heads and shoulders visible, the rest sunk into the soil. It's as if work stopped suddenly, one day. Imagine the sculptors had to lay down their chisels and never returned. Why? The soft rhythm of the waves and the rustle of dried grass offer hints of the story. Rapa Nui was settled by Polynesian voyagers, likely around 800 AD to 1200 AD. Scholars debate the exact timing. They brought with them crops like sweet potatoes, bananas and taro, and perhaps chickens and rats as well. In the beginning, The island was covered with forests of palm trees and teeming with seabirds. The society grew in isolation for centuries, completely cut off from the rest of the world on this remotest of inhabited islands. Over time, the Rapa Nui people formed clans and chiefs, and a culture that poured tremendous effort into carving these moai statues as representations of revered ancestors. The moai, averaging 4 meters tall and weighing many tons, were transported across the island and erected to face over the clan villages, perhaps to bless them with prosperity. To transport such colossal figures, they likely used wooden logs or sledges and ropes. The islanders also needed wood for building houses, for canoes to fish, and for fuel. We stop at an empty ahu platform by the shoreline. It's empty because its moai were toppled. Many moai were overturned in the late period of Rapa Nui history, possibly during clan wars or upheaval. Looking at the fallen statue face down in the grass, we sense desperation. What happened here appears to be a case of severe environmental strain and social strife. The leading theory is that the Rapa Nui people overexploited their environment, especially by cutting down too many trees. As the population grew, it may have reached about 15,000 at its peak. More land was cleared for agriculture. Trees were felled to move moai and to make canoes for fishing. But the trees did not regrow quickly, partly due to the introduction of the Polynesian rat, which ate seeds and saplings, hindering regrowth. Eventually, by around 1600 AD, the island's forests were largely gone, a case of deforestation on a frightening scale. Without trees, the topsoil eroded, making crop growing harder. Without wood, they could no longer build seaworthy canoes to catch large fish or escape the island. Life became a struggle. In the silence, you might imagine the creaking of the last giant palm tree as it fell, or the frustrated cries of fishermen unable to build a proper canoe. As resources dwindled, the society likely fell into chaos. By the late 17th century, archaeological evidence and oral histories suggest clan warfare erupted. The moai of rival clans were toppled, possibly an act of revenge or ritual, killing the protective ancestors of enemy groups. Human remains from this period show signs of violence. There are even stark accounts, and some evidence, that famine led to instances of cannibalism among the desperate islanders. Standing here though, we don't focus on the horror, but rather on the profound sadness that must have permeated the end of this once vibrant culture. By the time European explorers found the island on Easter Day 1722, the population had plummeted to mere 2,000 or 3,000 people, a fraction of its former size. The statues stood neglected. No new ones were being carved or raised. The forest was gone. The people were living in caves or simple reed huts for lack of timber. The outsiders who came would add to the tragedy, bringing diseases and slave raids that further devastated the Rapa Nui. Yet, as we stand by this toppled moai, bathed in silver moonlight now, as the moon has risen, there is a sense of resilience too. The Rapa Nui people did not vanish entirely. Their descendants still live on the island today, preserving what they can of their ancestors' culture. The land itself is recovering. Some trees have been replanted in modern times, but the moai remain the somber witnesses of a cautionary tale. Their gigantic stone faces seem to invite contemplation. Notice the expression carved on this one. Its lips protrude in a slight pout, its nose long, its eye sockets empty. The coral and obsidian eye inlays fell out long ago. It almost looks pensive, as if pondering the fate of its makers. Take a slow, deep breath of the ocean air. There's a purity to it, an emptiness that is both peaceful and a little melancholy. The surf continues its endless lullaby against the rocks. If you listen to that rhythm, it resembles breathing, the island breathing in and out, sleeping after centuries of toil and turmoil. We can let go of the drama now. What's left is a serene landscape, dotted with mysterious statues and overgrown ahu altars. It's quite meditative to walk among them, feeling the soft spring of grass underfoot, hearing only wind and wave. Our journey on Easter Island comes to a close as we walk back toward the inland plain. Perhaps you brush your hand along a fallen moai or an ancient palm stump on the ground, connecting briefly with the past through touch. As we prepare to leave, we glance back at the line of moai, still standing on the restored Ahu Tungariki in the distance. 15 dark silhouettes against the starry horizon, keeping watch as they always have. They seem content in their silence. Now, from the middle of the Pacific, our next voyage is a great one. We travel to Southeast Asia, to the dense jungles of Cambodia, where another civilization's remains lie intertwined with trees. Adjust your senses, feel the humidity rise again, and the chorus of cicadas swell as we approach the lost Khmer Empire, capital of Angkor. The Khmer Empire, Angkor, jungle insects and distant bird calls. We step into a warm, humid night in the midst of a Cambodian jungle. Over our heads, a canopy of leaves filters the moonlight into a gentle greenish glow. Fireflies blink lazily above still water pools of ancient Barai reservoirs. We tread on a stone causeway, partially cracked by roots. This path leads us to the heart of Angkor, the sprawling capital of the medieval Khmer Empire. All around, in the near darkness, rise the shapes of ornate towers and gateways, partially cloaked by strangler fig and kapok trees. The largest religious complex in the world, Angkor Wat, is a short distance away, its lotus bud-shaped towers cutting into the sky. But tonight Angkor is deserted, as it has been since the 15th century, when this city was mysteriously abandoned and left to be swallowed by the jungle. Pause on the causeway and take in the scene. Frogs croak in the distance, and there's a sweet fragrance of blooming frangipani carried on the still air. Once this city was alive, with tens of thousands of people, monks in saffron robes, chanting in the temples, officials hurrying to the royal palace, markets filled with the chatter of traders in spices, rice, and silk. The Khmer Empire, at its height, around the 12th century AD under King Javarman Fesib Thul's powerful and prosperous. Angkor was its gem, a vast urban complex of temples, reservoirs, canals, and homes, integrated with ingenious water management systems. This civilization built grand stone temples, like Angkor Wat, originally dedicated to Hindu deities, and the Bayon, with its multitude of serene stone faces. They ruled over much of Southeast Asia, linking trade between China, India, and beyond. Yet now, as we walk under a towering gate carved with 4 giant faces, each face gently smiling and facing a cardinal direction, there is no empire, no king, just the quiet of ruins. Vines wrap lovingly around intricately carved bas-reliefs, depicting celestial dancers, apsaras, and epic battles. The question of why Angkor was abandoned around 1431 AD has puzzled historians. The hints are subtle but present. We find ourselves approaching a temple entrance, where a massive tree has grown atop the stonework, its roots flowing down like melted wax over doorways. This is the famous image of Tapralm, a temple left in a semi-embraced state by nature. It perfectly symbolizes Angkor's fate. One significant factor was environmental strain and water management issues. Angkor's brilliance lay in its extensive network of canals and reservoirs that captured and distributed water from the Siem Reap River for rice farming. This sustained a huge population, but evidence indicates that by the 14th century, this system was overextended. A series of severe droughts, punctuated by intense monsoon floods, hit the region. The infrastructure, canals, moats, reservoirs, started to fail under the stress of these extreme climate swings. Sediment filled the canals, embankments broke. Without reliable water, agriculture would falter, weakening the economic base of Angkor. At the same time, societal changes were afoot. The Khmer Empire, originally Hindu and ruled by god kings Devaraja, underwent a religious transformation. Buddhism, Theravada Buddhism spread widely in the 13th and 14th centuries, promoting a different worldview that did not emphasize building colossal temples or the divine status of kings. As more people turned to Buddhism, the elaborate Hindu temples and the cult of the god king were gradually neglected. We can almost feel that shift here. The laterite stone of the causeway has spots where newer Buddhist shrines once stood, now gone, suggesting repurposing of older structures. The introduction of Buddhism taught self-enlightenment and merit over massive state projects, possibly leading to fewer resources devoted to maintaining the complex irrigation and temple building that Angkor required. And then there were external pressures. To the west, a rising Siamese kingdom, Ayutthaya, became aggressive. Historical records tell us that in 1431 AD, Angkor was attacked and captured by the Siamese. Some parts of the city might have been burned or looted, though it's unclear how destructive the invasion was. But certainly, after that, the Khmer court relocated south to a different region, near Phnom Penh, and Angkor was largely left behind. The reasons for leaving might have been partly that the new Buddhist rulers preferred a location closer to the Mekong trade routes, or that Angkor was no longer defensible or sustainable, given the environmental challenges. In any case, the great city slowly emptied out. Imagine the long procession of elephants and ox carts carrying the royal family and court officials away from Angkor Thom's gates, leaving behind only a skeleton crew of monks and local villagers. Standing now in the emptiness, one can sense both the magnificence that was here and the sigh of relief from the jungle reclaiming its space. By the 16th century, Angkor was largely overgrown, known only to local monks and perhaps a few nearby settlements. The proud temples quietly yielded to nature's persistent embrace. The kapok trees sent roots into the smallest crevices of stone, patiently prying them apart over centuries. Moss and lichens softened the once sharp carvings. Only the monkeys swinging through vine-draped towers and the call of hornbills disturbed the silence. There's a profound calm here now. The collapse of Angkor was not an overnight cataclysm so much as a gradual fading out, and in that gradualness, the city had time to fall gently asleep under a green blanket. Take another deep breath. The air is thick but alive with the smell of earth and leaves. With each inhale, you can almost taste the ancient energy of this place, and with each exhale, you release any lingering tension, just as Angkor released its worldly glory and settled into quiet slumber. We walk a bit more, stepping carefully over a toppled lotus bud turret that now lies on the forest floor. Fireflies dance above an old moat to our side, their lights reflecting in the still water along with the stars. It's easy to feel at peace in Angkor's ruins. Many visitors remark on a certain spiritual serenity here. The city may have been abandoned by its people, but it doesn't feel lonely. It feels as though the trees and stones converse in a language of patience and endurance. Our journey is nearing its end. We have one more place to visit, one more story of a civilization that disappeared quietly. Leaving the temples of Angkor behind, we now travel to the highlands of Africa, to a place of stone walls and mysteries. Great Zimbabwe. Take with you the sense of tranquility from Angkor as we set off. The jungle sounds fade, and now we hear the faint buzz of cicadas give way to an open savanna breeze. Great Zimbabwe, night crickets and distant hoot of an owl. Now we arrive in the rolling hills of southeastern Africa, under a sky glittering with stars of the southern hemisphere. The air is dry and carries the subtle scent of grass and distant wood smoke. Before us, partially illuminated by the moon's gentle light, stand imposing stone walls, curved and mortarless, constructed from thousands of cut granite blocks, fitted tightly together. This is Great Zimbabwe, the once thriving capital of a powerful trading kingdom that flourished from the 11th to 15th centuries AD. Tonight, however, there is no bustling royal court, no sound of cattle lowing in the stone enclosures, no traders' voices. The stone walls encircle emptiness and echo only the whispers of wind through the acacia trees. Great Zimbabwe is another civilization that was left behind by its people, fading into legend and silence. We approach the great enclosure, the largest of the ruins. Its outer wall, nearly 10 meters high in places, arcs around us elegantly. Touch the stone, it is cool and rough, each block chiseled by skilled hands long ago. These walls have stood for centuries, a testament to a complex society capable of great architectural feats. Inside the great enclosure are smaller passages and turrets. The most famous is a tall cone-shaped tower of stone, solid and purposeless, except perhaps as a symbol of royal authority or granary abundance. As we wander its base, the night is calm. A lone owl perched atop the wall gives a soft call, as if to acknowledge our presence in this otherwise quiet domain. Great Zimbabwe was the center of the Kingdom of Zimbabwe, which at its height, around the 14th century, controlled trade routes linking the gold fields of the interior with the Swahili coast on the Indian Ocean. Imagine, in the stillness, caravans of laden donkeys and men carrying ivory tusks and bags of gold dust departing these walls, headed north to cities like Kilwa and Sofala on the distant coast. In return, exotic goods came here: Persian pottery, Chinese porcelain, Arabian glass beads, all of which archaeologists have found amid the ruins. By day, this hilltop would have buzzed with political councils, the king's voice echoing as he gave judgments from a high stone seat. Below, on the surrounding plains, perhaps 20,000 people lived in mud brick huts, farming the rich soil and tending cattle, which were a measure of wealth. So why did this impressive city decline and become deserted? The timeline suggests that by around 1450 AD, Great Zimbabwe was abandoned by its inhabitants. There is evidence hinting at the reasons. One likely factor is environmental pressure and resource depletion. The area around Great Zimbabwe may have been overgrazed by cattle and overfarmed to support the large population, leading to soil exhaustion. The once plentiful game and timber in the region could have grown scarce. Perhaps there was not enough food to sustain the people. Indeed, the UNESCO description notes the hinterland could no longer furnish enough sustenance for the population, and deforestation exacerbated the problem. In the quiet night, you might picture empty pastures where once herds roamed, or springs beginning to dry up after forests were cut down. A sort of natural limit was reached, and the people began to disperse to find better land. Another factor might have been political and economic shifts. By the mid-15th century, trade routes could have changed. New kingdoms, like the Mutapa state, rose to prominence northeast of here, closer to the gold sources and new trade opportunities. The capital's location might have become less advantageous. If commerce waned, the elite of Great Zimbabwe might have lost their wealth and influence, undermining the city's importance. Imagine the slow exodus. The royal court, moving to establish a new center elsewhere, maybe following the Mutapa dynasty. Families packing their belongings, leaving the stone walls behind, with perhaps a heavy heart, but also hope for more fertile lands. There might not have been any violent end at all, just a practical relocation. Over a few decades, the laughter of children, the prayers at dawn, the clatter of workshops within Great Zimbabwe's stone precincts faded out. The city's name Zimbabwe means stone houses in the Shona language. Once deserted, local people perhaps regarded it with awe and some fear, wondering who built these giant walls, built these giant walls, built these giant walls, built these giant walls, built. For centuries afterward, Great Zimbabwe sat largely empty. Birds nested in the cone tower. Vines crept over parts of the wall. European explorers who stumbled upon it in the late 19th century were astonished, sparking wild theories about Phoenicians or the Queen of Sheba having built it. These were wrong. It was clearly the work of indigenous African civilization. But for the longest time, the ruins kept their own counsel, surrounded by whispering grasses. Standing here now, within the great enclosure, one feels a sense of stability and groundedness from these stones. They have not fallen. They are patient. The people left, but the land remained. And eventually the people elsewhere, descendants in the region, carried on their culture in new forms. In the silence, one can almost hear an echo of Shona music, the gentle plinking of mbira thumb piano, perhaps being played by a lone guard who stayed a while after most had gone, his notes drifting into the starry night, saying goodbye to the home of his ancestors. And then even he leaves, and Zimbabwe the Great is left to the stars. As we breathe in the night air, we accept the ease with which life can shift locations, and as we breathe out, we appreciate that nothing is truly lost when knowledge and traditions find new ground. Great Zimbabwe's people did not vanish. They moved on, and their legacy continued in new political entities. The ruins are like a memory of a chapter that ended naturally. Our journey through these forgotten civilizations has been long and gentle. We have floated across continents and centuries, observing scenes of former glory settling into quietude. Each civilization, the Indus, Minoan, Nabataean, Sangsingdui, Olmec, Teotihuacan, Mississippian, Ancestral Puebloan, Rapa Nui, Khmer, Great Zimbabwe, and more, rose, thrived, and eventually fell asleep in its own unique way. Some were struck down by nature's fury, others eroded by climate shifts or human choices, and many simply evolved into new forms or moved to new places. None disappeared entirely without trace. They left behind ruins, artifacts, and cultural echoes that whisper to us even now. We listen to those whispers tonight, softly, without the need to fully decipher every word, just enough to appreciate the impermanence and resilience of human endeavors. As you lie here, possibly on the edge of sleep, let the images of these ancient sleeping cities comfort you. They remind us that in the grand cycle of time, endings are natural and often peaceful. A bustling city becoming a tranquil ruin is like the cacophony of day easing into the hush of night. A mirror to our own daily rhythm of wakefulness giving way to rest. In the same way, now it is your time to rest. Feel the weight of your body sink deeper into your bed. You have walked miles in worlds long past, yet you feel no burden. Only a gentle fatigue that invites you to drift into dreams. Perhaps you will find yourself wandering one of these lost cities in your dreams, but now with the sun shining and the people restored, experiencing the life that once was. Or maybe you'll simply sleep deeply, with no dreams at all, which is perfectly fine. Notice your breathing, how calm and slow it has become. In Haut, there is no rush, no place you need to be except here. In this relaxed state, the soft, repetitive narration has served its purpose if your eyes are heavy and your mind quiet. If you are still awake at this moment, know that sleep is near. You can replay these soothing stories in your imagination, or even rewind this audio to wherever you like until rest comes. Your bed is your sanctuary, now as these ancient ruins were sanctuaries for history. One by one, let go of any remaining thoughts. They can be left at the entrance to sleep, just as a weary traveler sets down a pack. The civilizations we visited eventually surrendered to time. You too can surrender now to the pull of sleep, confident that you will awaken when you're ready, renewed. Tonight you have communed with the silent past and found serenity there. Carry that serenity with you into your sleep. The entire world around you is quiet and safe. Nothing from the day bothers you now. All that exists is this cocoon of gentle words and the soft darkness behind your eyelids. Rest now, dear listener. Like the forgotten civilizations, may you too disappear, but only for a while, into the healing embrace of sleep, leaving only the faintest trace of wakefulness behind. And in the morning, just as some of those civilizations gave rise to new cultures, you will rise to a new day, refreshed, renewed, and ready to build your own history again. For now, let the quiet of these ancient nights enfold you. Sleep and sweet dreams.